Diane, I'm listening to a podcast, Black Lodge Trivia Night. I've never heard so many game aspirations in my life.
Hello.
Nice.
That's a Twin Peaks poll, which is what our whole entire podcast is all about. Welcome back to Black Lodge Trivia Night. I'm Matt.
Hey, and I'm Art. And I just want to say, now that we've jettisoned the dead weight of Patrick, we can really talk about Twin Peaks finally, because he's not pulling his weight there.
Wow. You know, what's funny is it's summertime, so everyone's busy as hell.
Yeah.
All kinds, a million different things going on. And like, what an opportune time to finally do the Twin Peaks like watch along or thoughts episode. And we didn't even think about it. Didn't cross our minds once.
Right, until just a second, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, now.
Right. We could have just had some downtime.
Yeah, what a great night it would have been to have a Twin Peaks fan appreciation episode.
Pass. I guess it'll have to be some other time.
Or Elden Ring.
Well, why are we not? Okay, these are all good questions.
I haven't even started the expansion yet. That's how busy I am. I haven't watched your expansion playthroughs because I don't want to watch your expansion playthroughs until I play it.
They're not that good. You can skip it.
I love your playthroughs.
Oh, thank you.
Good.
I gotta say, let's just get off track immediately, because Taskmaster Patrick's not here to keep us on the rails. I really like the expansion. It's interesting though, because it's much bigger than you realize, because it's not just the space, it's about like 10 layers thick.
Nice.
And so there's a lot more of a puzzly aspect to it for getting around, which I wasn't expecting. And so at first I was kind of like, I just want to go there and I want to see what's there and I want to explore the cave walls and stuff like that. It's not so much that, it's, I don't know how to get there, and finding the route is a secret. It's a puzzle to get from A to B. And so it's
a little nod back to like something like Dark Souls and just like level design, or more just like it's very.
Yes. So to be vague, so avoid too many spoilers, there's like, I'm on a cliff and I'm looking down and I'm like, I don't know how to get to that village. And so I just keep exploring, not specifically trying to get there, but I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Inside these ruins, there's an underground section that I missed. And then I'm looking at it, I'm like, I think if I jump down there, I'm going to die. But then I realize, oh, wait, but there's this ledge. And then so eventually I manage to get down, and then I go through a bunch of tunnels, and all of a sudden I come out in the village. So in the base game, they would have had like the graves in the side. They would make it easy for you to get up and down. Here they hide it. And until you sort of crack the mystery, you don't get to go anywhere you want. In some cases. And so
very cool. Okay.
Yeah. And so I had to adjust, because I was like, I just want to go there and see, what's up with but I had to adjust to the idea that it's not an open world. It's a massive exploration puzzle on some level.
Well, that sounds great. That sounds awesome.
Yeah. Once you get used to that, it's really cool. And it's staggering to think like, Jesus, how do you even wrap your brain around it? So
sure. Well, that's like how I felt when Bloodborne to me is still I know like people love Dark Souls and like its interconnectivity. Bloodborne to me is still the best. Like when you come out of certain areas and you come around something, it's like, wow.
Right.
We were here all along. Like
exactly.
In this area, not like it's all connected. And Dark Souls 1 is very good at that as well. But
yes.
I think just because Bloodborne was my first. But folks, as much as we want it to be, we're
not ranking those tonight. That's a later.
We're just going to keep teasing that. We're not a Souls podcast.
Not yet.
We're not. We're not even a Twin Peaks podcast. But you know what we're going to start with? We're going to start with some good old Twin Peaks trivia.
Absolutely. You ready for me to throw it at you?
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. Because Patrick's not here, that affords us the opportunity to talk about certain seasons he hasn't gotten to yet, because I want to make sure when he's here, he has the chance to answer the question. Fire walk with me.
Okay.
We've got Agent Chester Desmond. He's the guy that's played by Chris Isaac. Interesting casting choice, but he's played by Chris Isaac. And during the first half of the movie, he's doing an investigation, and he goes to a trailer park as part of that investigation.
Yeah.
I think when he returns to his car, there is a message written on his windshield.
Oh.
This is sort of a deep cut, so I apologize. 2-part question. Do you know what the message was, and do you know what it was written in? It's a very deep cut, so I sort of apologize for that.
I don't think it was Firewalk with Me. That's correct, right? It was not Firewalk.
It was not Firewalk with Me, no. Although that would have been cool.
Was it a nod to Twin Peaks at all? Was it a line from like the main Twin Peaks series, or deeper than that?
I don't recall it as one. It was
so
somebody.
It's not like thous are not what they see.
No. It's not something blatant.
Ugh. No idea. I can't even picture the scene.
Okay. The message on his windshield is "Let's rock."
Okay.
Which I half remembered, and I was like, "Oh yeah," because I remember when I watched it, I was like, "I don't understand." And so, just as a sort of a second kicker, what do you think it was written in?
Eyeshadow? I don't know.
Actually, that's pretty close. It was lipstick.
Oh, okay.
It was, you're in the ballpark. It was makeup. Somebody wrote in lipstick "Let's rock" on his windshield, so that when he returned to his car.
I'm looking at a picture of it now, and it's ringing.
Right.
It's ringing no bells.
Oh, okay. Oh, no bells. Okay. I thought you were saying a little bit. Makes us realize we need to watch this again. We need to watch all of it again. We need to drag Patrick into watching all of it again. So a little bit of a deep cut. So
what's the significance of that? And obviously this is a spoiler for Fire Walk with Me, but what's the significance of Let's Rock?
That's the thing. I genuinely don't recall. And that was part of the whole thing is I didn't always understand some of the things going on in the first half of that movie. Once it switches to Laura Palmer's part, it really comes together and I genuinely love it. The first half with Agent Jeffries disappearing, coming back, Blue Rose cases, like it's a lot of, it felt like a lot of Twin Peaks mythology that I didn't know ever existed. And they were, I don't know if they were trying to catch us up or if it was just the thing that Lynch, because he sort of does that in like Lost Highway. If you've seen that, like the first half is one thing, second half is something entirely different. He might do that in something else and I'm blanking.
So I'm just like looking now. Some people think it's just nothing. It's just David Lynch being David Lynch and liking the phrase "Let's rock."
Right.
Another one is it's an indication of the man from another place.
Oh, he does say that, doesn't
he?
And
it's an invitation to what I assume would be the Black Lodge.
Right. Because he does say that in like that backward speech, right? Doesn't he say "Let's rock" at some point?
Maybe.
Oh, see, it is.
But he's always got music, so that's. And again, I'm just pulling these from Reddit from 7 years ago. So
right.
Who really knows? Dang, we need to rewatch that.
Let me get into the political channels on 4chan and see what they think.
Yeah, sure.
Give me just a sec. let's deep dive.
He was never seen again.
Right. 8chan. Oh, wow. This is new to me. I'm going to read the first thing I see out loud without, no. Oh man. So there you go. Maybe not the best trivia, but I wanted an excuse to talk about Fire Walk with Me a little bit because I like that movie a lot. Here's a quick trivia question for you.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Kyle MacLachlan and Laura Dern played Agent Cooper and Diane in season 3 of Twin Peaks.
Mm-hmm.
What was the last time that they worked together? I think I have the correct answer to this.
Dune?
Close. Blue Velvet.
I was going to say Blue Velvet. I was going to say Blue Velvet. I was like, I always say Blue Velvet. I got to pull something else out.
Yeah, no. Yeah,
not because I knew the answer, but.
Yeah, Blue Velvet. And then I don't think they worked together again until Lynch got them back together for
And I don't even think she was in Dune. I
don't think she was.
I should have known that she wasn't in Dune. Oh man, Blue Velvet.
I gotta watch. I just picked up the Blue Velvet Criterion because because it's so clearly like the precursor to Twin Peaks, and I'm like, I just haven't seen it in a while.
Heart. This just needs to be a Twin Peaks episode.
Does it? I mean,
I don't know.
We don't really have much of a plan for tonight, so if you want it to be.
What's your favorite Laura Dern role?
That's a good question.
And did you watch Big Little Lies?
I did. Okay. I did not enjoy that. I thought it was a little over the top.
Okay.
So, okay, this is going to be terrible. Laura Dern was they were all pretty good, right? The relationship with Nicole Kidman and Skarsgård was obviously horrible. It was violent. It was domestic abuse. It was played in a way that was like get out the stopwatch as soon as Skarsgård walks into the room, and how fast until he domestically abuses. It was just like, and that was almost every scene. It was just like, Jesus, okay. And then you could maybe hit the stopwatch to how quickly Nicole Kidman forgives him and sleeps with him after that. And it was just, and I know like it was trying to, I know these are cycles and patterns that are but in a compressed television show setting, I didn't always know how to react. It was always, this is horrible, but it was just like, man, like, you know, like he just put his briefcase home from, you know, down from getting home from work. It just, at some point it was just like, it's a lot. But having said that, is because spoiler, like he's the victim in the murder mystery, right?
I think so.
Yeah. And so I didn't know if they were trying to like, no, we get it. We already hate him. You don't need to, okay, we're going to do it again. Okay. Oh, we're going to watch this happen again. Okay. Like, I think maybe that was part of it. And that was actually part of an interesting discussion I was listening to. So I mentioned this Duckfeed TV, they do Fireside Chat. I mentioned it in some of the plays when I'm doing Elden Ring and the Souls games. And they did something for Blue Velvet. And
did they?
They did, yeah. I think they did. Was it them? I thought it was them. I don't know why they did Blue Velvet though. Oh, because they have a thing called like Unwatchable and they talk films.
Oh, okay.
And they said like, you know, Isabella Rossellini's character in that movie is abused like a lot. And they made this point where like at some point, like, is it not making the point anymore and it just feels gratuitous? And then if it's gratuitous, like who wants to watch like a woman get beaten? And I think that might have been part of my response with Big Little Lies is that like you've established that he's the worst, like he's truly a monster.
Right.
And I don't know if I don't know if it's serving the story to have him punch her again, or like at some point.
Yeah, that's a fine line, right? And I know that this is like we're so far off topic. We can like move this or just make this an off-topic episode. I don't whatever. But like that's such a fine line because do you feel like Misery kind of walks that line? Like how much more do you want, for those who haven't read or haven't seen Misery, like spoilers, but like I feel like it pushes right up against like, okay, we get it. Like this lady is gonna treat him like shit,
right?
And like flip a switch and do these awful things. And like so much of that book is just like waiting for something to happen. And usually that waiting for something is like her blowing a gasket.
Right.
But I think he pulls it off. I don't know.
Yeah, I will say the difference between those two for me, and this might not be a fair distinction, is that Misery is horror. Or it's written by a horror author. And so the torture is the point in a way, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I just read Tinner is the Flesh a couple months ago, and that was kind of the same kind of deal. Like it never lets up from the horror, which is essentially legalized cannibalism in a dystopian future. Tinner is the Flesh. That's not a spoiler, it's set out, but it like never lets up the gas from like shoving that down your throat. Should pick another analogy or whatever, but
right. And so
that's different with this horror. Yeah, that's probably a fair point.
And I think that might be because Big Little Lies is not meant to be horror.
Right.
And I could sit there and say like, maybe I didn't love Misery because it was too over the top and that's not my thing. And I've only seen the movie. I can't talk about the book. And I thought the movie was fine.
What? I thought you were like a big Stephen King stan.
I'm actually not. There are certain books of his that I love. One is his book on writing. One that I know may not be all that popular with his hardcore fans is 1963. I really liked the first Dark Tower, but I never got beyond that. And then he wrote a book it's like a novella that takes place like at a newspaper shop in Maine. And I can't remember the name of it. I liked that. Basically, I tend to like the ones that are not his typical. Like,
okay.
1963 is sort of like this sci-fi premise. Do you know the story about
Yeah,
that at
yeah,
all?
yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
It's basically a guy who figures out a way to go back in time, and what does he do with it? 1963, of course, is the date of the JFK assassination. You can start putting things together. But the book ends, it's really sweet. The ending of the book is very like sweet and touching in a way that I didn't expect. The novella is very much like a small town little story where I think maybe there's a mystery to it, but it reminded me of a book that I really, really loved when I first read it called The Human Comedy, which is like a 120-page book written in the 40s or 50s. And it's about a boy who works at a telegraph station, I think in upstate New York. And it's during World War II. So part of their job is delivering telegraphs from the.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So it's just this boy, his family, a little coming of age. And it just happens to be in this little moment where like a lot is happening in the world. What did I read? I read the Mercedes.
I remember when you read that and you said you didn't.
I genuinely did not enjoy any of those. I thought they were truly. The first one I thought was
the first one was good for 95%, and then like magic got involved. Spoilers.
Yeah, and then the second one I was like, I don't know why I'm reading this. The third one, it felt like I can tell you why I read them is because I watched the HBO miniseries, and I thought it was really fascinating. I'm like, oh, okay, I know it's supernatural. I didn't realize it didn't start supernatural.
No.
And by the third book, he's just like, fuck it. I don't want to actually write a straight detective story anymore. So, but I got to tell you, the thing that there were so many things that killed that for me, but one of them was when somebody put a silencer on a revolver.
Yeah, that checks out.
And I was just like, bro, like, I know you write fast, but somebody needs to Google that that's not how that works. Like you have to do you can't just write anything and have me go, oh, like you have to try a little bit. And if you're going to put a silencer on a revolver and
at least put it between two pillows.
Right. So that the silencer actually doesn't do anything because it wouldn't. And so I'm just like, you need to have a basic understanding of what you're doing. You can't write so fast that you get ahead of yourself and get a detail wrong. And then you can't just be like, have a character be like, having somebody have out of body experience is kind of a thing that's really happening. I'm like, okay, it's not, but okay.
So he has a line of like 3 books that are just straight up detective deals. And I bought those recently. I haven't read them yet, but I'm curious to read them because I liked Mr. Mercedes a lot until the end, and then I waived it, and then either you or I read somewhere that like 2 and 3 really jumped the shark, and I think get even more kind of supernatural-esque, and then I was like, nah, I'm out.
Right. The third one in particular is where they have a character saying, in all seriousness, maybe you should consider the supernatural. And you're like, you've never mentioned that once in the past 2 2/3 books, but I guess that's where we're headed. Okay.
Well, I'll check in on his like kind of hard-boiled detective stuff. I'm pretty looking forward to like. I'm sure they're horror-esque, but not like typical Stephen King stuff. Even more different than Mr. Mercedes and stuff.
Yeah, I think he doesn't get enough credit for like that small town kind of stuff, even when he takes the horror out of it. Like On Writing is very autobiographical, but it gives you like the sense of what it's like to live in rural Maine, and this novella was very much like just like this small town kind of vibe. It was I really liked it.
Well, good.
And when he stretches his legs a little bit, I like him more.
Okay. Yeah, I knew you liked On Writing because we had talked about it before, but I think I equated to that as you just being like a huge Stephen King stan, which is what happens when you assume. It's all good.
Yeah.
Well, that was a detour I didn't plan on taking tonight. Put that on your bingo.
All right. So, yeah, did we want to bang out a for real topic?
Yeah, maybe we should get on track. So we are an actual play RPG podcast, but we also just sit back and talk about RPGs and stuff.
Yeah.
And, a couple months ago, we wrapped up Pathfinder 2e. We did the beginner box, and it was very much a dungeon crawl. And I think we all walked out of that and even commented on the end of it of how much we enjoyed the dungeon crawl.
Definitely.
And what, as a counterpoint, and maybe it's a little, I guess it's not really fair to say it, and we can talk about it, was Scratch a dungeon crawl. And maybe it wasn't. But one, I think we could talk a little bit about dungeon crawls tonight, because there does seem to be this modern move away from dungeon crawls. And like there's the old school crowd and people that want to scratch that itch, and you can obviously, like, D&D 5e will put out a dungeon crawl, and Pathfinder will put out dungeon crawls. So they exist. I'm not saying it's like something of olden days, but a little out of favor maybe with like mainstream RPG to a certain extent.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought we could talk about dungeon crawls. Actually, you thought we could talk about dungeon crawls as your idea for a topic. I thought, hey, that's a good idea, because on paper, I don't like the idea of dungeon crawls, but in execution, they always work really well.
Yes,
and I have some ideas why. But they're not perfect for me by any means. But I don't know if I can start there, but then that's kind of like, then I'm shooting my load, because that's like the only sound thought I have on dungeon crawls.
Right. Oh,
Which
but
is,
I just want to confirm. So we're not doing top 5 side boob. That's not tonight's topic.
Nope, that's next month.
That's
okay.
We're
saving that one for Patrick.
Patrick, got it. Okay. Yep. Dungeon crawls, got it. Okay.
Dungeon crawls.
Write that down. Okay.
So here's why I think they work. In a perfect world, and like in my head, we're gonna sit down and play an RPG, and I come up with this great backstory, or I don't come up with a great backstory at all. But I still like, when I'm role playing, I'm gonna act like this, and I'm gonna do this. But with like Pathfinder in particular, where I find the mechanics so interesting, I want my character to do its thing. I want to see, and I know that role playing is about the experiences you have at the table, the story you tell, and everything you do together, but it's still a game.
Right.
And that's the reason we play the game instead of just having a collaborative storytelling experience, is because we want to play with these mechanics in this framework. So we're all playing by the same rules, and we get to do this cool stuff. And I think the upside of playing in a dungeon crawl is it's just repeat after repeat of giving your player the opportunity to do the cool thing that you've designed for your character.
Right.
If you have a full session, 3-hour night, and all you do is role play, and all you do is shop around town and stuff, you're not necessarily, maybe you do, maybe you don't, you don't get to allow your character to shine. And so I think sometimes why dungeon crawl feels good to me is like, my character got to do its thing.
Right.
And that's a good feeling. And they could be fun little puzzles, and there's all that stuff. But like, a fun puzzle can exist outside a dungeon crawl. But also, I just think, like, when I think about a dungeon crawl, it's just ramped up action, generally speaking. And I keep fidgeting with all the crap on my desk, and it all just fell over. So that's nice. I'll just set that down. I think that's why it works. There's lots of reasons why they work, but that's in particular why I like them, because I think it gives every player at the table the chance to have their character do its thing.
Yeah, I don't think I really have anything to add. I feel like you kind of said it. No, not really. So I will say this. I agree. What I think a dungeon crawl does is it serves as like a really good distillation of everything we were trained to expect from your classic RPG experience.
Sure.
And I think we covered it. And so I think it does a number of things. Like you said, it provides action. Because honestly, like, even as we get older, I know it comes up, like, we don't want too much combat, because after a while, you're like, Jesus, like, we've been doing this for an hour and 40 minutes.
Right.
But you still want some, because, 90% of RPG character sheets are action based. Like, what can I do? And so combat provides you an opportunity to flex all those muscles. As you mentioned, puzzles. I think everybody secretly likes the idea of being able to crack a puzzle. I will tell you, when we ran into the one in Menace Under Otari, we butt fumbled our way through it. But
brute forced the puzzle.
Yeah. And I will tell you, I was not happy that we solved it that way. Because I was like, I think Patrick and I were talking it through a little bit. And then I think he just said, nah, just do it again. And I was like, and when I was listening back to it in editing, I'm like, I think we might have started down the right path, but we're just looking at it, okay, whatever. And we both just said, I will try brute forcing instead of taking the time. And I wish we had been able to be clever enough to solve the puzzle. We weren't. And so I think it gives you that. It gives you, I'll say, and when it's a module as opposed to a randomly designed dungeon, it gives you a story.
Yeah.
So story, action, puzzles. It gives you everything that an RPG can do that just about no other kind of game can provide in one package.
I think you're right, and I think that then that is a fine line to walk where so I haven't done a ton of dungeon crawls. I've listened to a number of gameplay of them. The idea of doing like a 5-year dungeon crawl on one hand sounds so epic to me, but on the other hand, I know that I would get so incredibly tired of it. So I have a reprint of, I look up the title because I haven't pulled it out in a while. Night Below, which is an entire Underdark campaign.
Oh,
And
okay.
I think it's like level 1 through 18. It's massive. I think you start above ground and you work through these 3 books, and I think there's an overarching story, and it all sounds like really interesting to me. And it's like a dream, like D&D setting that would be super cool to do someday. But if it's all just one giant, and maybe it's not, it like I haven't read it because it's like the dream, like, oh, maybe someone will run this someday. I shouldn't read it. If it's just one mega dungeon for 18 levels, just kill my character now. But if it's a combination of hex crawl, dungeon crawl, whatever,
right,
with a nice overarching story that blends it well, then I'm here for it. And that's where Menace Under Otari kind of hit well. I know it took us a year to play, but that's because we died and had to reset.
right.
But what a sweet spot that is, because I think it gives you a lot of action, but you're not married to it forever.
Yes.
So like I only have a tolerance for dungeon crawls. I don't want to live in a dungeon crawl.
Right. Right. And yeah, like you're describing a mega dungeon, it feels like this endless possibility. Like you were saying, you just look at it and say, oh my God, there's so much. But in my head, it feels like it's the exact same thing with just a different coat of paint every time you go to the next level. But that's mischaracterizing them, I know, because I know, like, when I've heard or skimmed through something, there's like a lot of faction.
Yeah.
You know, they try and they introduce systems to make it feel alive. But at the same time, but like you said, you're sort of committing for like, I'm only going to be in this sort of one idea for the entirety of my character's progression. And as grown-ups, like, getting to level 18 is going to take you 25 years.
Right.
And so it's like, I think I've even talked to some folks outside of Black Lodge when they were like, oh, I'm psyched to run this. And I'm like, but doesn't this mean you're committing to run this for like the next 10 years? And I think they're like, yeah. And I think they're okay with that. But I wouldn't be, there's too many things I want to do. Like, we have no attention span. That's the whole point of Black Lodge Trivia Night, you know?
Right.
So
we just talked about Stephen King, for God's sake.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important, and like in video games do this, right? There's video games respect people's time, where like before when I was a kid and I had all summer to play games, yeah, that's great. But like now video games will either like give you a refresher on like controls or something like that, or just like ramp you up into it and not, or they have an easy like narrative mode. Like God of War has an easier mode so you can just experience the story and like just respect your time for the people who want to experience it. So like an old mega dungeon isn't necessarily going to do that.
Right.
But here's a question for you. Level 1 through 18 or level 1 through max level mega dungeon, on its face, probably not that appealing to you. What I know about you like the idea of spending a little time in something and then going and exploring something else. But what if it was all of that, but just a Moria mega dungeon?
That's interesting. Moria might be the closest I would get to wanting to spend time there because of the setting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I want to say, but I will say, like, you know, if you follow this channel, there's some Lord of the Rings online.
Mm-hmm.
Moria is one of the least favorite parts of that game for me, because it's confining. All of a sudden,
Mm-hmm.
like, at least the way it was originally designed, it's a bottleneck. You hit a point and you have to go through it, and it's vast, and in its own way, it's impressive. And I feel like I would feel this way about the mega dungeon, but it's still this one thing. And like I said, I like story above almost anything else. Setting is like close second. And so unless you're giving me a story that makes me want to stay in the dungeon, then and that's what I don't know about a classic mega dungeon. And that's what I think was so good about Menace Under Otari, was that it's a dungeon crawl, but it's bespoke.
Mm-hmm.
A mega dungeon feels like at some point, like if you have like 12,000 pounds of bespoke, is any of it really bespoke anymore? Or is it just like, is there going to be a story that's going to hook me
Well,
for?
to bring this full circle and bring it back on topic, let's talk Elden Ring, right? So, like, if you're designing a mega dungeon, unless you are just like a whiz bang game designer and story writer, at some point, and maybe I'm completely off base here, but just assuming your ideas get diluted, right? If you're designing a level 1 through max level dungeon that is meant to be played over years, not every experience can be as rewarding as the next. Like, there's diminishing returns for a creator in my eyes. And so when you take something like Bloodborne, or in my case, Dark Souls 3, in your
Right.
case, Dark Souls 1,
Mm-hmm.
where the boss fights are these memorable, epic moments that you'll never forget.
Right.
And then you want to scale that up to the size of an open world, which I realize is like the antithesis of a dungeon crawl, but just bear with me here.
Sure.
So this is more like dungeon crawl versus mega dungeon, I guess. Um, the generic Elden Ring boss fights are diluted and are a fraction of anything in Dark Souls, Dark Souls 3, Bloodborne, whatever. It doesn't matter. Now, there's amazing fights in Elden Ring, don't get me wrong. And so, like, to a certain extent, I think that holds true for the idea of a big, daunting dungeon. It doesn't have to be a mega dungeon or anything like that, but just like spending all of your time there just has to be like, it has to have an upper limit, both in like creativity and like reward. Anyways, I don't know if that analogy works, but when you talk about how um Menace Under Atari is like this distilled essence of everything that's good. Okay, now you're going to multiply that by 50 and try to like capture that essence over and over again. Then I think you have an Elden Ring situation.
Yeah, and so are we ranking souls?
Yeah.
No. So, are we finally doing it?
I think so.
So right, and so I think then you have to shift focus, and yeah, you can't scale up bespoke to that degree. I just want to quickly point out, for anybody who knows like the old Middle Earth role playing game, there is actually a mega dungeon. I think.
I
And
think it's Moria, right?
it's Mount Gundabad.
Oh, okay.
There might be another Moria, but this is one of the blocking
I think
the
there's a
moneymaker.
Moria for MERP.
Yeah, and I got to check it out if there is. I started fishing for it because I'm like, I know I have a mega dungeon for MERP, and that's the one but I need to track down Moria. Anyway, right. So like, and I feel like part of what makes a bespoke Menace Under Otari successful is that it is small.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can pour all of your energy into making this thing good, and you don't have to keep going and keep going and keep going. And so like with Elden Ring, I think the genius of it is that they understand that to some degree, and then you get, I know we're talking about Elden Ring, but but I think it ties in. You get the classic dungeon areas.
Mm-hmm.
I think they understand like they can't spread what their magic is over the open world, and so they'll make self-contained. And I think they sort of managed to get a little bit of the best of both worlds, maybe
I think
like master of none, so to speak. I'm
for
sorry.
clarity, but I think the point still stands. Where and I think that's more of modern game design, right? Like again, I haven't played all the old stuff, but like some stuff I have done, it's just like it's a dungeon crawl and you're just going room by room and step by step to see what kind of happens.
Right.
And you'll just have like empty rooms.
Mm-hmm.
And like you're gonna spend 15 minutes describing an empty room. And like again, it's like let's talk about Scritch Scratch, poor Scritch Scratch. Which again, this is the scenario writing. When you have a mini dungeon crawl through a house,
Right.
and 10 of the rooms don't fucking matter. Like, what are we doing here? And
Right.
sometimes some of that's how that older stuff has felt to me, either playing it or reading it or listening to it played. I don't know. It's like, why does this room even matter?
Yes. I will say I was running my kids and nephews through a little bit of the Keep on the Borderlands, whatever the
In the classics reimagined, whatever.
Yes, yeah. And you sort of get, because I was like, oh, the magic. Like you see the map, you got the numbers on the map, you go to the paragraph and read it out loud. And it kind of killed our campaign.
Yeah.
Because we did like a much smaller module that I sort of expanded on a little bit. And everybody, including myself running it, had a blast. An absolute blast. I'm like, okay, let's like roll this into try and Keep on the Borderlands as a classic. And it was just like, okay, go to the next room. Did we go up this passage yet?
Yep.
Okay. Check that
That's
box.
dungeon crawling at its worst.
Yes.
When you're just and like there's even been like rules light stuff where it's like, oh, this is system agnostic and here's like my deal. And it doesn't dungeon crawl doesn't have to literally mean a dungeon. You can island hop. You
Right.
can
Be anything.
move from one section of an island or room to room in a house. But if there's 30 map keys and 15 of them are just a description of the room, like that works a couple times. But for me, like, boy, do I lose interest. So I get that, and I think that's just again, you're respecting your player's time, and not everything. It can't be like a horror movie cannot be jump scare after jump scare after jump scare, unless you're what's his name Sullivan, the guy who did oh my gosh, not Sullivan, oh my gosh, who did Haunting the Hill House? Flanagan, thank you. When he did the one about the kids. And there was that one scene where it was like literally like 55 jump scares, one after another, just to fuck with the audience. It was like it was a brilliant. I was cracking up, but you couldn't do that for the whole like. So in the same thing, like you can't have banger after banger after banger. You need to mix it up for your players to make it interesting. You can't, but also you can't just have dead areas anymore. Too old for that shit.
Right. And when you make, the bigger you make it, like you were saying, you can't fill all that space. And so you lose the ebb and flow, like say of Menace Under Otari, where it'd be like combat encounter, fire rat that nearly kills us, into statue puzzle that sprays water.
That almost kills you.
That almost running theme was that Patrick and I were terrible at Pathfinder 2nd edition.
Right.
But you don't get story beats. You don't get, like I said, ebb and flows. You don't get, switching up pacing. It's just like, again, in the Keep of the Borderlands, it was just march into room. I read the description. Oh, there's monsters. And then, it was boring.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's why I have when I said like my initial gut reaction to a lot of dungeon crawls is like, ew.
Right.
Or when I see like some like something I back on Kickstarter or get from Exalted Funeral. It's like, whoa, look at this setting, look how magical. And then I open it up and it's just like, all right, here's 30 prompts for 30 cool areas. It's like, no, that's not what I'm looking for either.
Right.
So I think it's a fine line to walk.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, you could come up with something that's like, okay, here's 10 cool rooms in a row. Like that's great and all, but like in a perfect world, my dungeon crawl is like plot that drags you in there, that has your characters vested in it. You're in it other than just your explorers in a cave, right? You have to have a reason to be in there. And then you have a variety of mechanics that keeps the players engaged. And like I understand this is hard to craft, And then in a really perfect world, you introduce continuing plot points.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it'd be really cool. We only found the dead bodies because you guys died. But like, if the dungeon crawl had those dead bodies organically,
Right.
like you're like, oh, we're investigating missing fish. And then all of a sudden you found like bodies from 3 weeks ago. Like,
Mm-hmm.
oh yeah,
Mm-hmm.
what a hook, you know? So like that would be like my perfect. And then like if you're playing 2 hour sessions like we typically do, then like you're out in 5 or 6 sessions. You
Right.
know, that's like my perfect. Now, if it's really cool and epic, I could do something longer, but that's like how I would see it for the most part.
Yes. Yeah. And yeah, I totally agree. And it's, I do think there is, maybe we've talked about this before, but some of these OSR revival things, I think Shadow Dark is one. You know, a lot of what is their draw. I don't know if Cairn second edition is one, Knave, is these ideas of you don't need to do any prep to go through a dungeon. And I think even like what's the one that Patrick and I played? Into the Odd.
Yep.
You know, but to Patrick's credit though, when I asked him like how much, and he was like, well, I was just kind of making it up. And he's really gifted at, you know, like when we did Conspiracist, he was just pulling everything out of his butt, but it still had a sense of cohesion to it that made it what I needed. I need a little bit of something, something. And so if you tell me like I'm just gonna roll tables and see what happens, I'm like, why don't we just, you know, why don't we just play it for the combat or something? Like it doesn't, you know, we could skip that part and just jump to the mechanics or I don't know.
I think it's a fine line because sometimes I can work. I the reason why I'm bending back and looking behind here, and I can't find the supplement. There's a Morkborg supplement, and it
Okay.
involves something about a bridge,
Mm-hmm.
and it's kind of this procedurally generated, like a lot of Morkborg, which is low prep. You roll a bunch of tables and you get some cool shit. And I think that's just again, and the big takeaway from all of this, which isn't helpful, is it depends. It essentially generates a dungeon crawl for you across like a very when I read the supplement, it's very Bloodborne-esque.
Okay.
And you roll on these tables and you get a certain amount of like encounters, but all the encounters were bangers.
Oh, okay.
And so like even if you did 12 of them, like you have a very cool procedurally generated dungeon with all these unique different twists, and that's again just good game and scenario design, right?
Right. Right.
So like but on one hand when it's just like, oh, roll a table up to see and like get some clues to generate this dungeon, that doesn't sound great, but I think I know there's exceptions to that. I wish I remembered what the supplement was. I thought I had all my Morkborg stuff here in a pile, but obviously I don't.
Right. And let's, I should say that up front. Like there's definitely going to be exceptions to it. It's,
Yeah.
and I will say, I'm still trapped by seeing like a 3-volume, 12 million foot deep mega dungeon and going, oh yeah, I could see myself doing that for the rest of my life. I don't know why I feel that way, but one thing I wish I had tried before this is going to just the wherefore out there, Romeo, you know, to be or not to be, Ironsworn Delve.
Yeah.
Which,
Me too.
because that's the sort of dungeon aspect of Ironsworn, which is a random generated game that I really enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wish I had the experience of his take on creating the dungeons, because I imagine it's not a dungeon crawl,
Right.
but it gives you, it would be like these little diversions as dungeons within this engine of randomness that I often find myself going, nah, but maybe this time. And I wish I had tried, and when we should try it, because I've always wanted.
But his system of randomness is so well done.
That's true.
I mean, because I'm right there with you. If it's just like choose your own adventure by consulting a D6 table, that's not it. But it just works so well in the Ironsworn system.
Right.
Yeah, we absolutely should.
I think the secret is that it's willing to say, and without making you maybe feel like you're doing all the heavy lifting, you're doing a lot of the lifting. Like it's saying, hey, you be creative, and because you're gonna get prompted to fill in the gaps, it's gonna mean something to you. Which, like a table like you were just describing of D6 rolls doesn't do that. It's just we have 2 wombats in a swamp cave of fire. And you're like, okay. But when the oracle is like, prompting you to paint the picture yourself, it's kind of genius in a way.
Yeah, but he pulled it off for Dragonbane as well, right? So again, I think the point of this is, one, everything matters. It takes a good amount of skill to make a truly epic dungeon, and it doesn't have to be rules heavy, because the Dragonbane stuff is so good. And it's very much a dungeon crawl, and very much room to room to room to see what happens, but somehow it's different for me, and I guess it's just the writing style I like.
Yeah.
But
the overall setting I like as well. That helps.
Yeah, which all that matters.
Yeah.
And even I don't know. I guess I'm like hypocritical here, and I guess there's not a really or there's no right or wrong answer. Sometimes the dungeon crawl is going to be good, sometimes it's going to be shit. I don't know, but I'll play them and I'll find out.
Right. Now, let me be a hypocrite. Cairn Thalas.
Yeah.
Got a session up last week. Got another one coming up.
Nice.
I finished the intro domain. That's what their dungeons are called.
Okay.
I loved it. It's very much a random generated dungeon crawl. It's not Oracle based, so it's not having you fill in gaps with yes, no's, and likelies. But I think its secret sauce is that it's not about the dungeon. Much like in a video game parlance, a roguelike is not about getting through the areas. It's about surviving as long as you can, building up that experience. And so with Cairn Thalas, it's almost like you're in a room, now you're in a corridor, room. It's almost inconsequential what the dungeon itself is. It's just sort of like this framework for what you encounter, how you manage it, how you keep going that little bit further, getting the gear you need to survive just a little bit longer. And it's just how far can you push it? And so I think that's why I'm being hypocritical, because this is a super duper random generated experience.
Dungeon crawl.
Yeah. But in my mind, it's not about the dungeon. And I think maybe that's its secret.
I don't even know if I have a thesis other than they work and sometimes they don't work. Sometimes they're written well, sometimes they're not written well. Maybe my other thesis is everything eventually devolves into a dungeon crawl, whether it's mini or not. Like, think about every game we've played, and ultimately it's still a dungeon crawl at some point. Cyberpunk Red, we go into the bad guy's hideout.
Right.
You move room to room. It's short. We're done. We're out. That's not the focus. Unless you're doing like purely theater of the mind and do none of the detail of how you move across an area. All of our games are going to be a certain dungeon crawl to a certain point.
Right.
But I don't know what the effect of that is, other than just like, look at me. Everything's a dungeon crawl.
And yet nothing is no, we're not
Damn
going to do
it.
that. Again, then what if the color blue I see? But I think though, but that gets back to what I think we were talking about earlier, what I was sort of saying earlier, is the reason why we're such goddamn great GMs, top notch, is that I think you want to inject a little dungeon crawl into everything. Absolutely. Because it does give you everything in one buffet, to butcher the analogy.
Let your character shine. It also builds suspense, right?
Yes.
Because
sorry, go ahead.
No, well, I mean, if you're just like, okay, you fight these guys in this room, and all of a sudden you move into the boss's room, and there's this, and now you're fighting the final boss. But it's like, instead, if you talk about going down the stairs and like, oh, you're in this empty corridor, and all of a sudden you hear some movement on the other side of the room, like, that's all building suspense and just telling a better story and giving your characters the sense of place and the sense of progress, which is a very important thing for like dungeon crawls as well. Like, look how much we've explored, look how much we've done, but also even like on a smaller scale, like, you're moving through this house, you're moving through the skyscraper, whatever.
Right.
So it all, anyways, system, setting, type of game, none of it matters.
Not at all. And I will say, like, to what you were just saying, like in Cyberpunk 1, it was advancing the story, which I think too often people just substitute dungeon crawl for everything. I think it can be really good in service of the story, because that's what I'm looking for.
It should be in service of the story.
Yes.
Unless you're just like, hey, fuck it, guys, let's roll up like characters and just like go like, look, that would be an awesome night too. Like, hey, we're just gonna do this dungeon crawl, and it's gonna be a roguelike. Like, how far can you guys get? There's no story here. Like, that's different. But like, if we're playing a campaign, it should be in service of the story. It shouldn't be hey, here's a detour for the next 3 levels.
Right. And I mean, again, getting Karen Athalis, like, I think it would be really fun if the 3 of us rolled up characters and just saw how far we could get, because we would make it fun shooting the shit with each other. But like, to sort of borrow from another medium, say, like, we've both seen The Matrix. I assume, right?
Yeah. I was gonna fucking do it. I was like, no, everyone's seen The Matrix.
The what now? The who? So near the end of The Matrix, it's like, what do we need? Guns, lots of them. They enter the lobby. They blow the shit out of the lobby. They go up the elevator. The elevator explodes. It's a dungeon crawl. They, get up to the roof, jump off the roof. The helicopter swings into the building. That's a dungeon crawl.
Spoilers for Matrix, by the way.
Yeah. And it's you might as well just say, like, it's an action set piece, but it's moving from room to room, using action, character strengths, cool puzzle solving, to further the story. And so, yeah, I feel like in a role-playing game, there's nothing wrong with giving you some, a bite of action. Because even like in what you were describing with Cyberpunk, like getting across the room, because it becomes its own puzzle once you start to frame out what everyone sees, which is why I tend to lean a little bit more away from total theater of the mind all the time. Because it doesn't even matter what the map is, but as soon as you put a map in front of somebody, getting from A to B becomes something you have to solve. So, so I don't know. I feel like a dungeon crawl is really useful as a tool, but I feel like, when you turn it into like the sole purpose of what you're doing, you sort of, just as you would with any mode of storytelling, you're not doing yourself the most favors you could be doing.
Yeah, you don't always have to be so heavy-handed with it. Again, scratch. And even none of my games did this. All of my games were perfect, so I don't have any examples from that.
Right.
But no, like even up in the balcony of Cyberpunk Red, just like before, like when the first shootout happened and we were in the orchestra, right? Like we talked about like moving through that space, and like sometimes like that's the worst for me sometimes. Meaning that not everything has to be this spatial, like I move from this side of this room to this side of this room. That doesn't always have to be covered in gameplay. So we don't always have to be so heavy handed, which again was some of the scratch stuff. Like, oh, we moved into this room. Okay, I move into the hallway and I moved into this room. Like, that's like ease up. Like pull back from the dungeon crawl there, Call of Cthulhu. Like, don't make your players do this.
And what would change if that house had half the rooms? Like nothing.
You can just consolidate them.
Yeah.
Right. I really think that's just a really bad case of scenario design. But again, it's no different than other stuff we've played. Like I'm sure, like upstairs in oh my gosh, I can't think of the basin. Like moving from room to room, it's like you want to do it because you don't want to shortcut the story. Like, oh, I walk over to this person's room. Oh, the door's locked. Like,
right.
I don't know how to handle that stuff, but that's probably some of my least favorite stuff in role playing.
Right.
Is the minutia, and the minutia that has no payoff.
Yes. Yeah. So, and that's the tough thing. Like there was one room that was locked on the second floor that was very story critical.
Right.
But other rooms were locked on the second floor. It didn't mean anything.
Yeah. What if I spent an hour like and I don't remember if it was AEC or Lords of the Dungeon or something like that. Like, if I'm picking the lock into Joe Schmo's room, and then it's like, well, great, but that's it's like not an important room. If you have a great GM, they make it an important room, I guess. But like
Right.
most GMs aren't going to do that. I probably wouldn't think to do that. It'd be like, look, you fucking idiots. There's nothing of relevance.
Just make
here.
the door unlocked. Just let them in.
Yeah, or make the door unlocked. Yeah. Right.
Get it over with.
And so I think that becomes an easier trap to fall into with Dungeon Crawl, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you get lost in the minutia, and for what? And that's just like my own personal struggle with RPGs sometimes. It's like, why are we doing this?
Right. And like some of the dungeon crawls, I don't know if I played in or skimmed, like you've got like the garden level, and then you've got like the volcano level, and then you've got like the ice palace, and you just realize like they're just
You're
filling.
Just talking about Legend of Zelda right now.
Oh man, I just became a Zelda hater. Here come the comments. But yeah, you end up just sort of like you're filling up the page.
Yeah.
So
it's
it is
fine line.
Yeah. So is the idea that like, are we just not into mega dungeons? Is that
probably? I don't know. I've actually never played one. I've just read them. And like again, the idea of a night below is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I will never do it. And I'll never get rid of the book either. I was like looking at it when I was like consolidating the shelves to like clean them up.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I can't get rid of this.
Could you borrow from it?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So then I think it's the same thing. Like if you were to like take a whole sandbox open world thing,
mm-hmm.
then it's the same thing, right? Like I've never done like a truly the world is your oyster. I have nothing prepared where it's going.
Right.
I've listened to those, and sometimes I've heard it done fairly well, but like I don't want, and I've played in games where that's been the case. I don't want that.
Right.
I want the illusion of the sandbox. We can do whatever we want, but damn it, you better have prepped. like you better have something over there. And so like it's just like everything else. Like you can't be too heavy-handed with one mechanic in any RPG probably.
Well, let me say this. I'm currently in a long-running man, how am I blanking on the Free League.
That's all right. I had to look up the name for Dragonbane.
No, not Dragonbane.
I know.
The problem is that the book is behind a pile
Forbidden
of
Lands.
Forbidden Lands, yeah, which I love. And it's very much, meant to be like just randomly. But what I've appreciated about it is, and I don't know the magic sauce behind running it, it feels like even though maybe you could argue certain things happening are random, there are things that coalesce because I think the dungeon master, the GM, is naturally going to want to make connections.
Mm-hmm. Right. Right.
And so I think if you just insist on it being random, then maybe that's not, but if you let it, like the Oracle system in Ironsworn, if you let it, guide you to make connections, then I think it could really be great. The other thing I want to say is the One Ring 2nd edition. I've done Strider mode myself. I'm also running it on the side, outside of Black Lodge. And I think the secret sauce to that is it's very much a hex crawl, but the hex crawl is not the point. It will say like, hey, you need to go to this point on the map, but then it makes a game out of getting there. Plot your course. Once you start making the trip, you run into surprises, you run into difficulties, but at the end of the day, you're trying to get to a specific point.
Right.
And so it creates the hex crawl while you're traveling and then gets out and lets you move on and do the actual story. I think that works pretty well.
So we've arrived at sometimes dungeon crawls and hex crawls are fun. They're in every RPG. Sometimes they're not fun. Sometimes sandboxes are fun. Sometimes they're not fun.
Yes.
Mega dungeons are big.
Any of the hard truths that we can. So I just want to spoil a little bit behind like how the sausage is made. The topic I was throwing around for a little while tonight was rank your top 5 dice in RPGs. Because I just wanted some. And I'll tease. I was going to start by throwing a hand grenade which is most overrated die.
D20?
Alien stress die.
Oh, no. No, what? Okay,
See,
hold on.
it was a mistake.
So now
this is what we could have been doing.
Well, no, I think we can't. Any other comments on Dungeon Crawl? Because I need to get your thoughts on this.
Yeah, so as far as dungeon crawls go, they're complicated and they elicit many facets.
Are we starting the dice tier list? Is that like am I making you so like now you have to come up with a because we also talked about like tier listing some shit tonight.
Oh yeah, but we didn't have the graphics.
Guess what? Art's got homework now.
Yeah, we're gonna. I do want to get. Honestly, I do want to set up those. I'm sure I can make it in Photoshop. It's not that hard, but
they have them online. You just get the S.
Oh,
the S tier ranking image. Yeah. Everyone uses the same one. Yeah.
Yeah, because I feel like it's a path to generate some probably pretty interesting discussions, especially
sure. Yeah.
I put the alien stress.
Well, I'm already hot and bothered under the call about the alien dice.
Yeah. So, but yeah. I mean, as far as I think dungeon crawls go, I think the secret to their success is that they are used in service of something else. I think players most of the time, even and I can only speak from my perspective. Even as a kid, I wanted some story, and as long as at the end of this little dungeon crawl was a MacGuffin that I could say served the story, I was happy. But on its own, as just like a floating mechanic, it doesn't mean anything to me. It has to mean something for me to want to do it. And I'm easy to get there. Like I don't need a lot to make it meaningful, but you gotta make it meaningful. And I think that's for mega dungeons, that might be the distinction, is that there's too many factions, there's too much going on. It's never going to mean something to be in this one spot going 500 levels deep. But that's my problem because I haven't spent, and I don't have the time to spend, nuancing my opinion because they take forever.
I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm going to say something. Well thought out, well crafted, meaningful dungeon crawls are S tier. Bad dungeon crawls are D tier.
Only D. Interesting.
I think D's the bottom.
Is D as low as it goes? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We need to get Art trained on tiers. So, a hot take of the night. Good dungeon crawls are good and bad dungeon crawls are bad.
Nailed it. I mean, this is what people come here for, right?
I was going to put the graphic up right now. And to make it hard on them, it's going to be on this side of the screen.
So is that what is called a like tautology? Like red fire engines are red? Like did we just like state something like good is good and bad is bad?
Our whole fucking episode. Yeah.
Should we just kill this whole thing?
No, I love it. It's amazing. And now we need to talk about okay. I think are we good on dungeon crawls?
Yeah, I just want to double check tautology really quickly while you did I use that word correctly? I'm a little tautology.
Is there any tier below D on a tier ranking?
Saying the same thing twice in different words. I don't know, maybe that's not quite the same thing.
Oh no, I think we've done that for the last 30 minutes.
Yeah, I was just okay. We're so good at this.
No, I think it's good because I think there is like legitimately. I know, like for me, it's interesting because I do think when something is good, it's good. Like when a well crafted dungeon crawl comes across my lap, it's awesome.
Right.
But man, when a bad one's there, I couldn't give two shits less.
And okay, so just to so we go. What is it you're looking for? I've said what I want it to be.
Same thing. It's got to be well connected to the story, well thought out, and meaningful. It needs to respect my time as a grown ass man.
Right.
A grown ass man child. It needs to respect my time that I can't do a summer long epic mega dungeon. Now would be awesome if I was like 14 again, or if we had RPG summer camp. Sure, fuck yeah, I'd do it. But no, it needs to be meaningful and impactful and tied to an overarching story. Unless you're doing like oh yeah, here we go. Like I always thought like it'd be fun to do like have you ever read David Gimmel's Legend?
No.
Best siege story I've ever read. Like even better than 16 Ways to Defend a City, which is another great siege story. It's all about this like multi-tiered city with all these walls under siege and everything that
Hmm.
goes wrong. And it's part of this bigger universe. You can read it on its own. It's like book 3 of something, but trust me, it's standalone. I recommend it. It's one of my favorite fantasy stories of all time. And I always thought it'd be like really cool to just have like a siege night. Like, you guys are on the wall. Here's what's going down, and I'm just gonna throw shit at you. And it doesn't really matter what the story is. It's just like what's gonna unfold with these characters that are trying to withstand a siege. Like, that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a dungeon crawl because you're not progressing forward, but the dungeon's progressing on you, right?
Right.
And so, like, again, outside of that, I want it to be meaningful and tied into some overarching story, and I want to get in and I want to get out.
Right. So maybe that's the real takeaway instead of good is good and bad is bad, is that we want dungeon crawls that are in service of the story, smaller, more bespoke, so more thought could be put into each portion of it. Yeah. So it's not just wasted filler. And it gives our characters a stretch all their abilities, chance
less
to shine.
Bloated.
Yeah. So bloated. Maybe that's the real takeaway for our discussion of dungeon crawls, of what we really want when we approach it. And we use it, like you were saying, in multiple ways. Cyberpunk, it's really a catch-all phrase for like a set piece.
Yeah,
in my mind. So
set pieces matter.
Yeah,
like they really do, and for all the reasons we said. Yeah. And I think it makes it a better story than just for not having them. So, very good.
Nice.
Okay. Oh, I got to hear this. So, before we get into it, stress dice and Alien. So, Free League D6 system, for those who don't know, uses a great mechanic where you can push your dice. And when you push your roll, usually you're taking some kind of hindrance. They handle it in different games. But it either lets you re-roll your dice, you get bonus dice. In the case of Alien, you add more stress, and you have your pool of dice. So if your strength is 3 and your fighting is 2, you're rolling 5 dice, you're looking for 6s. If you push that roll in Alien, you pick up a stress die. And so you get to roll more dice, but those yellow dice can have bad results. And the higher your stress level is, the more disastrous results you can have, and it can snowball out of effect. Like, at first you're just like nervous all the time. Now all of a sudden you're acting like hastily and you're firing like a live silenced revolver off in a space station. And so like it's this growing mechanic where like you're pushing yourself, but you're also like risking negative consequences. I think it's one of the best. I think it is the best implementation of the like pushing your die roll in any system, period. So you to say it's the most overrated thing, how dare you?
Well, I thought yourself. It would, like I said, I intended it to be throwing a hand grenade here into.
Wait, do you believe it, or you just throwing some salt up in there to?
Hey, I'm just asking questions. So what else?
Do your own research,
right? So what I'll say is that I like the mechanic. The reason why I think it's overrated, though, is because sort of the approach that it's like we even talked about like, oh, I wish it was in Vaesen. Like we place a lot of and so it makes me wonder, like, there's the contradiction that as I know the stress can have negative consequences, but all the dice in a dice pool system could have some. It could break your equipment. It could, and so what it's doing is it's making you have the chance to be more competent the more agitated you become. And so, it actually, I think, but what I think it does really well is that I think it's fun for the players. It gives you more stuff to do. You just make that pile bigger. And the failure on those dice feel unique to the other types of failure, which is why I actually think it works pretty well and why I actually like it. And just saying it's overrated is not quite the same as saying I think it sucks.
Fair.
But it is sort of seen as this, like, oh my God, like especially when you drop it into Alien, like, holy shit.
But Art, what push mechanic is better? Like, what? So, for example, lots of games allow you to re-roll die rolls or change your result. Call of Cthulhu, you spend luck points. So you're spending this arbitrary pool, and like the onus is on the player then. If you're going to spend luck points in Call of Cthulhu, the expectation is like you need to narrate why you got lucky, and you need to narrate the stress in Alien, which I think is an important aspect of all of these mechanics. Why are you able to redo what you're trying to do? Um, in Savage Worlds, we get a Benny, which is this limited pool of stuff, and then you get hero points in Pathfinder, which I think is the weakest. Like I like rewarding players for good gameplay. I like that aspect. Like, hey, here's a hero point, here's a Benny because that was awesome. Now you get to use it in this epic heroic moment. That's awesome. But mechanically, and in terms of interesting like game mechanics, um, those are like the weakest. Other than like, I don't like the spending luck points at all. Call of Cthulhu. Like, I never want to do it. And I'm also the guy like that hoards resources too. So like, you end up with 1,000,000 health potions.
I do that too. Yeah. So I think the question you have to ask is, what, if I may go at my own ass for just a moment, if you'll entertain
Do
that.
that all you want, buddy.
That's why we're here. You have to ask yourself the bigger question, which is like, what are we trying to accomplish? So the stress die. So is the question like, you're saying what's the better push mechanic? Push mechanic is one thing. The stress die, I think you can make the argument, is something else. The stress die, what we're trying to do is we're trying to create an escalating dread that you're eventually going to break under. That's stress. That's I think the idea of the stress mechanic. So when you tie it to, at first you don't succeed, try again, that's sort of an interesting pairing. I think there are mechanics, and I don't know if I could just bang. I don't know if I could cite a source. I think there are mechanics where when you increase the pool, the stress die works against you. And I wish,
But doesn't the alien stress die work against you by rolling face huggers?
but it can work for you by giving you the potential for a ton of successes.
Yeah, but think of like an action movie, right? Like, I mean, that's like, and maybe that's not fair because not every push should be this epic action moment, but like,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
just like think about like, I don't know, like Star Wars or any like high stakes moment or anything where they fail and then they try again.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the pressure's on then. And so
Right.
like then it's rolling it in like, all right, now you're focused and the pressure's on, you're gonna roll this dice, and you know that things can go bad because you have this risk of face huggers and things can go epic. And so I think that's like, and maybe that's not appropriate for every situation, and maybe that's the bigger problem. I don't know.
Well, okay, so let's look at it this way. So if we put it into context, throw another hand grenade here, of the third best Alien movie of the original trilogy, Aliens. Oh, I said it. So let's take stress within the context of that universe. Great scenes where they're going down a hall and they've got the motion tracker sweeping, and they're like 30 meters, and they're like, I don't see anything. 20 meters. I don't, and the tension is, the stress is building and building and building. That's stress. They're not getting more competent. They're getting overwhelmed by this dread. And
Yeah, but the same situation could then be the stress is building, the stress is building.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the guy with the machine gun just opens up full fire and just unloads because he's freaking out. And that can have heroic or disastrous consequences.
True. But I think,
But also, that's not what every role using stress dice is going to be. It's not going to be a guy pushing himself. It's going to be a guy trying to hack a computer.
right.
That you're right. All of a sudden, I don't know. It's I wonder. I don't remember how Alien justifies getting more dice.
Well,
So would
right.
would you like it if you didn't get more dice? Like if you just got to re-roll and now instead of getting this dice. So how do we fix this, right? Because I get what you're saying. I do, like, why are you getting more competent if you're supposedly getting more stress?
Right. I
Or
see pushing the redo is one thing, and what I believe the stress is trying to do, I'm trying to separate those and talk about them distinctly
okay.
before we put them back together.
So the stress, so let's talk about the stress piece.
Okay.
Maybe the problem is we're thinking about the stress simultaneously as the roll. So you're making your roll. I'm going to shoot this guy. I miss. I roll the dice. I'm going to pick up these stress dice. I'm going to re-roll it. And I'm re-rolling and I add in this yellow dice. Bam. And then my stress escalates.
Mhm.
Maybe the way to think of it, right, and I don't know why I'm defending Alien here or not, but, like, now you're stressed because you almost blew it,
Mhm.
and so your stress level has gone up.
Right.
Not that you're stressed out and you became more competent. It's like, "Oh, shit, man, I really gotta nail this guy. I'm gonna focus," and, like, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I'm reaching here.
Right. Like, and that's the idea. Like, you know, like I was saying, there's certain, and I wish I could remember the game where you add more dice to the dice pool, and the dice you're adding subtract successes away from
Then why would you add those? Just because 'cause you're stressed
because
out.
you're stressed,
So
right?
it's a penalty, it's not for okay.
Right, right. So that's why it becomes, to me that becomes like a more elegant stress mechanic than like Call of Cthulhu, because it's not a given,
Yeah.
but it's a risk, and this is what makes it less fun for the player. There's no upside. Where
Yeah, so what if you took out the upside?
I think that becomes interesting, but I think this is where it's like we're playing a game, bro. Like, why don't you pump
Yeah,
the
but
brake a
it's
little?
already a pretty forgiving game. Like,
I guess that's
generally
true.
speaking,
Yeah.
it depends on, I guess it depends on what you're fighting or in which of the versions you're in.
Right.
But generally speaking, I think it's, you know, pretty forgiving. You're gonna roll lots of successes
Hmm.
anyways.
Right. So
Um,
I think my
hmm.
position is, and I haven't thought this through because again, I meant for this to be like a really dumb hand grenade to throw into the
No,
beginning of
no,
a
no, it's
dumb
good though.
discussion. Is I think there's sort of like the 1,000-foot view. Okay, what is Alien trying to accomplish as a game? Is it about like this impending sense of doom that overwhelms you and eventually kills you, much like a Call of Cthulhu, but better?
Mhm.
Or is it about just getting out there, space trucking? So I think so. The Alien game, especially now that they, I think, put out like their space trucking book, feels like there's sort of trying to set out to do two different purposes in a way,
Mm.
which is whatever, you
Yeah,
know.
because a space trucker's probably not taking on stress, and so maybe you shouldn't re-roll your dice in. I don't know. Um,
Right.
But I love the increasing, so if we go back to the stress, I love the increasing stress almost more than anything. That the more you do this, the more dire consequences are gonna be.
That's true, because you could roll a
Where
lot of face huggers.
it's less interesting in Tales from the Loop or Vaesen, where it's just like you're harming yourself to re-roll this, um, and hindering your rolls. Whereas Alien, it's just your stress is building and you're still gonna have your successes, but boy, when you fail now, you're so strung out that you're gonna fail epically.
Yeah.
Whereas instead with Invasion, if you push yourself, you're just setting yourself up to fail more
Mm,
because you're hamstringing yourself.
right.
And so it's more satisfying to the player, and I as a design mechanic as a whole, I like this. You're not necessarily punished explicitly for doing this a couple of times, but man, when you go down, you're going down in a blaze of glory. Instead of just like, "Oh, I've neutered myself. Oh, I've neutered myself. Oh, I've neutered myself." And isn't Dragonman's the same
I
way?
was about to
They're
say,
like
I was just looking up at
yeah,
Dragonbane because the consequences for pushing when I was doing my solo run were more severe than I realized.
but then it solves your space trucking deal, right?
Mhm.
You're not gonna push your roll to fix the coffee machine.
God damn, I will. Yeah, right, exactly.
Or maybe you do because you like
I'm
you
all
need
in.
it. But
Yeah.
so I think there's a fine. I still think it's like we need to rank this.
And I'll say this, my premise might be flawed in that um I'm operating in the premise that like why do you get better when you're under stress? Adrenaline, you
That's
know,
well, yeah, that's right, right.
so I fully admit. And again, I wanted to create a top 5 list of dice. It's a dumb premise to begin with, and I
No, but
thought
we're
this was
gonna
a
turn this
fun.
into like the tier ranking of mechanics.
Oh, okay.
We're gonna assign this something S through D, which you've walked yourself into, and
Shit.
now you can edit in a graphic to plop art over us.
Okay. Um,
So
okay.
and we can just do the this mechanic tonight and make it like a
Oh.
every mechanic ever list going forward or something like that. Um, yeah, I don't know why you get more dice,
Mhm.
but the fact that those more dice carry a risk is so fucking brilliant. But
Right.
you're right, narratively, you can only have so much adrenaline, right?
Right. And
Mm.
I don't claim to know what the right answer is. And I don't even, like I said, I could be operating from a completely flawed premise. And I actually also really like the mechanic because I'd love to see it in Vaesen.
Okay.
But I thought it was a fun.
I'm flying a little off the seat of my pants here.
Okay.
So we have S through D. S is this mechanic is the best mechanic. We want to see it in every game system we ever play. Throw it in everything.
Sure.
D is dog shit.
D is
I
for
don't
dog
want
shit.
it in my game. A is like, hey, that's excellent. I want it in most of my games. B, I would say, is like, I want this in a specific set of games. Meaning I want the sanity mechanic only in certain things. I don't know. And then C would just be like, that's fine.
Yeah.
How's that sound?
Yeah, so I'm willing. I mean, much like where would you place it? I'll say where I would, if it were a solo list, where I would put it, and then
We'll just average out,
and we'll see what you think. B, it's something that I think has its purpose. I would like to see it sort of
in
like
a specific type of game.
surgically used, but I don't know if it's something I want. And I'll say like, well, we'll get to Benny's and stuff like that on another day.
Oh, we can do it tonight too, but
we can do a couple, yeah, because
yeah,
I think
my gut reaction was S.
slowly roll.
I don't think it belongs in everything. I do it. Do you have to separate them though? Because I think the idea of stress and adrenaline and those two things coming together and then having consequences on your player, that would be S tier. But that's not what this is, right?
No, it's the
This
stress
is
die
the stress die, which is
of Alien.
representing those things coming together and increasing your dice pool in stressful situations when you want to push your roll. So for me, I think that's A.
Okay.
Where I want it in most games, and it's really good, or in a lot of games.
Okay.
It is one of my like most satisfying mechanics in a lot of RPGs.
So what do you think? Do you want to? Now I wish Patrick was here because he could break the tie. I think he would lean more toward your position if I had to guess.
He would. I think it would average out to an A.
Yeah.
Like if we had more to add in, it would probably be like a low A tier.
So you want to call it an A?
Yeah. Yeah.
Alien stress die. All right.
You can just take this cover of the Alien cover I'm holding, and you're gonna slide it into the A slot, right?
Would we do the cover or would we do the die itself?
No, whatever you want.
Who the fuck cares, Arthur? This is stupid.
No, it's not stupid.
It's extremely
important. I don't know how to make it work. All right.
Now, do you have? So, like I said, this all stemmed because I thought it'd be funny to do top 5 dice in RPGs, and I was just going to throw out a bomb to get the discussion started. Do you have a die that you consider overrated? We could also do this every time. It's just like I can give number 5 next time. I have a list.
No. So you want me to do a die? A die?
Yeah, that's the thing. That's what makes it sort of dumb but fun is that we're ranking the dice in RPGs. And it could be literally anything. Like it can be a D20, but I picked the Alien stress die to be overrated.
No, I think that's good. I think that's actually worth ranking it more like a D20 maybe, isn't it?
I'll tell you where D20 was on my list, but I'll tell you another time. It was going to be a top 5 list. I'll say that.
S tier?
Is a D20 an S tier? No, but I can tell you what ranking it has. I think
isn't by definition like a D20 strictly B tier? Like,
I'll say
it belongs in games that utilize a D20. Nowhere else, no.
I'll say on my top 5 list, the D20 was number 5.
Okay. You put a short video out. Hey, folks, here's my top 5 dice of all time.
Oh, maybe I should. It's so stupid.
The D20.
The D20 was
It's
number
got
5.
20 sides.
Number 4, I can tell you, I had it all worked out to number 1. So maybe I should do that. So dumb.
All right, let's talk about a dice.
Wait, did you
bonus?
Okay.
What?
Are you doing your most overrated?
I don't know about that.
Okay.
I don't know about that. But I want to hear you defend
Mm-hmm.
the bonus die that player characters roll in Savage Worlds. So like a NPC does not roll the bonus die that mono. So You roll if you have a D8 in a skill, you
Mhm.
roll a D8 and then you roll a D6 with it, right? Is it always a D6 if you're a player character? Like if I have a D4 in a stat and am I also rolling a D6 bonus die or am I rolling two D4s?
No, it's a D6. It's always a D6.
So even if I'm dog shit at this skill, I'm rolling a D6.
Yeah.
And I get it. It makes you succeed more. And
Mhm.
Savage Worlds is this game about epic action and all of that stuff.
Right.
But what's the point of that extra bonus D6 die?
Okay. Are we gonna tier list it?
Well, yeah, but we can discuss it a little bit
Yeah, yeah.
first.
Okay. So what I'll say is this. The first thing I thought about when I was trying to homebrew with Savage Worlds was how do I get rid of that die? And I'll tell you why. Because what I see it as doing is it's Savage Worlds wants, in my head, Savage Worlds wants the player to succeed.
I think Alien does too,
Yeah.
to be clear.
Yeah. And maybe that's why, the stress die, it's going to give you more chances because, yeah, it wants you to succeed.
Mhm.
And in Savage Worlds, it's sort of, gives you two chances. And this is where, like, I don't claim to know the maths.
Sure, right, of course.
And so this is just purely a
Or fall in our hearts.
exactly a soft science approach to numbers. I I feel like it's because it's like, what's the point of a D4 as your skill if you're rolling a D6? But again, I know the average of a D4 D6 is different than a D6 D6. I understand that.
But still, why?
But why? Right. And so when I started looking at Savage Worlds for different settings, one was for Deus Vult
Mhm.
because it's meant to be a little bit more investigative and it's meant to be a little more horror. It's more ominous. It's more investigating these awful things and trying to make sense of them. It's, and like there's, Savage Worlds, Deadlands Noir, Realms of Cthulhu. It's all these like investigating horror. And I was like, yeah, I think for those, I want the players to feel it more. So when you have a D4 and a skill, you have a D4 and a skill. That's it. Like you've got a 25% chance of pulling it off.
Right.
So and so what I ended up doing is like with Deus Vult is I just leaned into. I mean, you played, in my, Helligane.
Helligane, yeah.
She fucking kicked ass.
Yeah, she did.
And so it still had the investigation stuff, but like when it came time to throw down, and to be fair, Deus Vult is meant to be like, you're meant to be James Bondy kind of super characters.
Yeah, her combat skills are very strong, and I took combat specialties with her.
So, but I think it does limit its ability to. I would be curious to try it in settings like Deadlands Noir and Realms of Cthulhu to see what the approach is and how it coincides.
With you mean without the bonus die?
No, with it, because maybe it would help me understand that the bonus die doesn't impact things as much as I think it does, or it can be corrected with GMing or
right.
penalties.
And again, I think it comes down to what kind of story does Savage Worlds want to tell. And again, they want you to succeed, and it's supposed to be high action,
right?
Lots of successes, lots of hits. So if you take that bonus die out, you probably have very slow combats, which Savage Worlds is not trying to do.
Not trying to do.
But then the problem I have with it is it dilutes your character a little bit with that exact, like, oh, I'm bad at driving tanks, but I also have a backup D6 in driving tanks.
Right.
And that, so like, then like, what's the point of your stats? Like just give us both two D6s or something, like, which again, there's math and science behind it. But that would be my knock against it, but shit, does it feel good as a player? Have you played Savage Worlds or have you only GM Savage Worlds?
That actually is a good question. Now that I think about it, I think I've only GM'd it because I think we were going to give Deadlands a shot. And I know Patrick at some point in our rotation is talking about bringing Deadlands back. So
You better.
Yes, because I would genuinely love to try playing it.
Because boy, when that bonus dice pops off and you have a shit skill,
it
it's
feels
fucking
good.
awesome, right? Like
Yeah.
when those dice start exploding, like you feel like a hero. So it's doing the thing. The downside is it makes you not really feel like your own thing. I don't
Mhm.
dislike it, but I think it's a slightly flawed mechanic. And like, what is this thing? Why not just make your stats like D20 based and like give you the same percent? Like if a D6 plus a D4 gives you a 47% chance of success
Right.
of rolling a 4 or higher. Well, why don't you just use a D20 system and make it a base stat of 10, you know,
Right.
where you have a 50% chance of success?
Right.
I don't know. Maybe they just wanted to be different.
Exactly. And the D20 is the number 5 RPG die.
Mhm.
But that's the
Mhm.
thing. So, like, if I were trying to do the math, you've got a 25% chance on a D4 and you've got a 33% chance. Do you multiply those together? Is that how you figure out the.
Don't you have a 50% chance on a D6?
Well, you have to get a 4, 5. Yes, that's how bad I am at math. Times 0.5.
Hello and welcome to Math with Soft Sciences.
That's the thing. I don't remember how to calculate probability, and I don't know how many sides are on a D6. So it's a
I
lot
think
going
this is
on.
accuracy. I'm just kidding. Obviously, it's not. I'm just fucking...
Right. So yeah, I do. What I would someday like to do is try a game like Deadlands Noir or Realms of, specifically Deadlands Noir, to see what happens when you bring. Because one of the things I did when I run Savage Worlds is the classic is it's either a -2 or a -4,
Uh-huh.
and I use -6, -8 because those are things that are possible in combat, and I'm like I think they should be possible on all die rolls. Like I think you should have like your classic standard, hard, really hard, and impossible. Like,
Mhm.
and so in my mind, I'm using that to help negate, you know, a D10 and a D6, and either one could explode, and you're just trying to beat a 4, and so if
Yeah.
I want to make a roll hard, I can, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think it does. And I think if I fix this, I want to just drop the bonus dice because again, all right, let's do a Wild West shootout. All right, everyone, including the NPC, is rolling a D4. It's like
Nobody hits.
3 hours later.
Yeah, yeah. Um,
I'm out of ammo and I'm just going home.
Come back tomorrow.
All right, let's tier list it. What do you got?
Okay, so the bonus die, I don't what it's called, the wild. I forget what it's called. I'll confirm what it's called. It's the wild die or something.
Oh yeah, I kept saying bonus die. I think wild sounds right.
I think wild die, but I'll
Or you're a wild card.
You're a wild card, so you get that die. I'll have to figure it out. Well, so I'm saying that within the context of Savage Worlds, so far, I think it's great because, like you were saying, as a player,
Yeah,
it
it's
feels
fun.
great.
It feels real good to play with.
Yeah, and I feel
And I
like
don't really care that it deletes my character. If I have a D4, it's like, oh, good, I have this backup.
actually I have a D6. Yeah,
Yeah, right. Like,
and I will say, like in our games, there's plenty of failed skill rolls.
oh yeah, right. Yeah,
Um,
we're missing plenty still.
and so yeah, and this ties into Benny's because there's a lot of ways to succeed in Savage Worlds, but when you don't utilize them all, there's still plenty of failed die rolls. There's been critical failures, which means you rolled a 1 and a 1. There's the bad stuff happens and it's fun. So it doesn't feel like it's just an instant win button all the time. Having said that, I don't think I want this mechanic all over the place.
No.
But it's not dog shit. It's
No.
really good for what it is. So I think that ends up being like a C, right?
I think it's strongly a B.
Oh,
Like
would you give it?
it's
Okay.
good at where it belongs. Like C
Okay.
is just kind of eh.
Oh,
Like,
that's
I
true.
think something in B is like it belongs in Savage Worlds because of the
100%.
system they've built. Which I like this kind of dual like idea of like you don't have stat points. Your stat points are your dice.
Right.
I mean, you have stat points, but like that correlates to the die you roll. So it's cool. I think it's strongly a B. Like it is very fun to play with. There is no real knock against it, but I wanted to go after one of your babies.
All right. Okay, so this is good. We've started tier listing stuff. I've started mentioning my top 5 RPG dice. A lot of stupid things coming out of my mouth tonight. I like it.
Love it.
How do I do that? Do I do like a quick video, or do we all want to sit here and rank our top 5 dice because it's dumb?
Uh, You take that one, buddy.
It's too dumb for Matt, is what we're hearing. I like it because it's dumb, I gotta say. But it did get us to start tier listing mechanics, so that's good.
Maybe we'll just tier list something. It doesn't have to. We can also just like pick something and be like, all right, hey, tonight we're gonna tier list. This would be a huge undertaking. Pathfinder classes. It doesn't have to be a living like a tier list that like, oh, you need an ultra wide monitor to see all our for like the 30,000 mechanics we've ranked.
Well, that's what we should do. Right. We should just tier list whatever the fuck pops in it. Like maybe it's not even all the classes, but you're like the kineticist. Tier list it. Go.
Oh, yes.
We're not going to do it now. Save it.
Oh yeah, but then I'm also like, it's also got some like broken ass mechanics. Like some of the kineticist things are busted. I think they fixed them.
Right, but that's why it ends up suddenly like surprising you and becoming a C. No, I'm kidding.
No, I think it's one of the best design classes of all time.
So yeah, so we'll save that, and that's what we'll do. We'll pick something dumb and we will tier list it. I think that's a good feature going forward.
Tier list the NPCs we've encountered across all our games.
Oh my god.
Tamily.
B. I think she's really good for what she is, but I don't want her all over the place.
What do you mean? That was like Mickey Mouse. That wasn't Tamily.
Do I need to add that to the list now? Tamily?
What was Patrick's bartender? Because that guy is either an S or a D. Because of Patrick's.
Oh, because you wanted to murder your.
Oh my!
I remember it broke you in the middle of the session.
It absolutely did, but Patrick played him. Patrick's performance was an S.
Right. I think we would need Patrick here to.
Oh yeah.
I wouldn't want to take that agency away from him.
No, amazing.
All right. So I think this covered a lot of good bullshit.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
All right, man.
For the summer we've had, which has been unfortunately not allowed us to get together with some amazing games we have going on. Eat the Reich debuted. If you haven't watched that yet, that is amazing. We're literally just like eating Nazis and dripping their blood over our bodies, which was so amazing. And then Art Spy Game, like, and we just haven't gotten back to those, and I just can't wait to get back to all of it.
Same.
It's been a summer.
It's been a summer, and hopefully we can limp along for the rest of the summer and get through it, or maybe it all starts coming together and we are able to get back to it.
Yeah,
it'd be great either way.
Well, it's nice to talk tonight because then it's like I said, my brain has been so fried from work that like there's been no creative juice up there. So a lot of like creative endeavors, whether it's RPG stuff or whatever it is, have just been like put on the back burner because I get home. It's like I don't have the headspace to think of that. But it's nice to like get together because then it's like, oh, I want to pull out some Delta Green stuff because like my Delta Green fiction books are like right there.
Oh, nice.
So every time I look up above my monitor, it's like, oh yeah.
Because I gotta tell you, I'm psyched for that whenever its time comes.
That's definitely the next thing.
I wanted to ask. I think I misunderstood the assignment when you asked like Fall of Delta Green is a lot of origin stuff. The other Delta Green is if we wanted to do more Twin Peaks immediately.
Yeah.
Were you leaning one way or another, or?
No, well, so it also depends on like the vibes I'm feeling, right? So like ask me on a Tuesday it's one way and ask me on a Thursday it's the same way or something. But like if I want to run a pre-gen scenario, it's going to be Fall Delta Green.
Got it.
And I think I got my shipping notice on the one I want to run.
Oh,
like the rough draft's been out, but now the book's been on like pre-order for like 3 years. It's been a long time coming, and it's finally shipping. And it's got some really interesting East Asia scenarios. So like Vietnam.
That's cool.
I think there's maybe one that crosses over into Laos, stuff like that. That'd be really cool. That would be more structured. But then if I want to get the creative juices, like build my own thing, tell my own story, then it would be Delta Green because that'd be set in like the 90s or maybe like late 90s, early 2000s. So not Twin Peaks time, but like peak nostalgia time for me. So
can I ask a question?
Yeah,
because this might sort of lean how. I mean, either one sounds fucking awesome, but with Twin Peaks season 3, they start expanding the mythology to include quite a bit of history. Would you be using the Fall of Delta Green potentially in Laos or the Far East as anything that would support what you end up doing in the
Oh, yeah.
90s,
I've got some ideas.
then I
I've
want
got
to.
a lot of ideas, but they don't necessarily have to be played in order.
Okay. Because
So
then I would want to definitely do the old stuff if you've got ideas how to turn it
but
into
I think I
connective
can
tissue.
tease the old stuff, and that's what. And I know I've gotten away from it, and we teased it, but remember my original idea with Delta Green was to tie it into Old Gods of Appalachia.
Oh, right.
But I wanted that to be a set piece in the 1920s,
Mm-hmm.
and then this Delta Green piece that ties back to it.
Okay.
And I've just have never sat down to come up with like what are those story beats. But if half the story beat is done with Fall of Delta Green, then I've already had these like brainstorming moments. Like, okay, if they're gonna play through this Fall of Delta Green scenario, and I want to tell this Twin Peaks story, but I also want to bring in the history of like the Fall of Delta Green and all the like the Delta Green mystery stuff and the stuff's going on, and like then I want to be able to like tie those up, and maybe it starts out like with subtle nods and stuff, and then maybe depending on how much we like and play it, like does it build to this crescendo of like being intertwined. That's what I've toyed around with.
Mm.
So, and having half of one story part makes it a lot easier than inventing one story and then inventing another story.
Right. I could see that.
So, but like Old Gods at some point I want to play too. And they have like written modules for Old Gods now too, which I've not read, but I'm curious to check out, see if they're any good.
Nice. And I would play that as connective tissue I would play that standalone. I think the idea of that sounds really fascinating.
Yeah, me too.
Cool.
Lots of stuff. Oh man, see, that's what I'm talking about. Just getting together.
Now you're
and
back.
just getting away from coming up from air, getting away from work for bullshit. It's like, oh yeah,
like real life is fucking dumb.
it's the worst.
Yeah, it's a drag.
I want RPG summer camp now. That's what I want. It's like
for big boys
for like 3 months.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, and I still want to see my family and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm not saying I want to break from my family for 3 months. I just want to check the fuck out for 3 months.
Right. I want somebody to pay me to check the fuck out.
Right. I want to just do RPGs for 3 months. And just like no other responsibility. And if only I was Matt Mercer.
Well, I'll say this. I know I should let this wrap up and I'm going to keep going on. You missed out playing RPGs as a kid.
Yeah.
I will tell you this. When me, my brother, and our closest friend were balls deep into the RPGs and school let out, we were like, okay, let's fucking plan this out. And we did that. And we spent the entire summer, okay, we're going to jump to this. Okay, let's do this. And we played the shit out of RPGs. And when in a blink of an eye, September was coming around, we were just like so deflated. And I will say, as having not had that as a kid, I will say that might have been a little bit of missing out on something.
Oh yeah,
I
don't doubt
so
it at all.
Good
like,
and so bad.
We had different like hobbies, of course, and like I grew up with like
girls, dating.
No, none of those.
Oh, okay.
So like we had PS1 and stuff, and so like as soon as school was out, it was like, oh yeah, now we're like glued to the TV, which is like way worse.
Right.
I just like no one in my like my brother played Magic the Gathering,
Nice.
but no one played RPGs in anyone that I was close with until high school. I did like some drama shit.
Okay.
And like some of the drama kids did. And that was like my very first exposure. Like,
so did you ever have like the summer of Final Fantasy VII? I don't know where the timeline or whatever the equivalent would be. Like,
for me, it was a little bit, yes.
Okay.
And it was Legend of the Dragoon. And I remember when I got it and I never beat it. I think my save file corrupted.
Oh no.
Or I lost interest. But then there was also, for us, it was more like the winter break of Metal Gear Solid, which was amazing. So we got the PlayStation 1 and then my parents got us like this big stack of games. And the PS1 had been out for a long time. Like we went from NES to PS1, but PS1 had been out. So like we got this big stack of games. And I remember watching my brother and like being so fascinated by the lore of Metal Gear.
Okay.
And so like then we were glued to that. And there was like a few other games that I remember like capturing me that as much as Metal Gear, but Metal Gear was the first game that we played a shit ton of Twisted Metal because I was like, oh my gosh, like that was dope as shit. And then like finding secret levels on them and stuff. But like the first game to really drag me in like that to like consume all my time was like Metal Gear.
Okay. All right.
And then also then when I was in high school was also World of Warcraft. So like same thing, like summer let out, and then it's like, oh, we're gonna fucking play WoW all summer.
We're doing this, boys. All right.
Yeah.
Cool.
So
all right. A couple more things we need to S tier rank. PlayStation 1. Wow.
PS1 is S tier all the way.
All right. I've never owned a I will mark it down. I will trust your PS1 S tier. Nice. Very nice.
So in case you're deciding between Alien Panic Dice and getting that PS1 finally, go with the PS1.
PS1 is ranked higher officially. So.
Glad we can provide this public service.
I love what this list is going to do.
Yeah.
I pay this as the highest.
Belongs in every household in 2024.
It's going to be so good and dumb in a good way. I love it.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, folks, that's going to do it for us. I know we took a lot of detours and we started off on topic, but boy, did we really hone it in and come up with some solid information that I'm sure will shape and mold your RPG experience. If you want more of it, make sure you like and subscribe and check out all our other content, our discussions and gameplay. Don't forget, we have a podcast if you want to listen to this in audio form. I think we're on social media. I've been so checked out of social media lately that I don't even know, but I think Art's on there.
I try to keep it up, but social media is the worst.
Yeah. So go check those things out. Follow us. If you have any questions or comments, don't forget. And of course, the best place is over on our Discord server, which you can find a link down in the show notes. Talking RPGs there, posting links. The new Morkborg Viking deal, like I'm pretty horned up for that, and like that got shared in our Discord. So
nice. I think I need to jump on that.
Yeah, just keep watching that. I keep getting the ad as my ad on YouTube, and every time I hear that like woman's voice and that epic Viking music, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna get this.
Yeah,
and then I haven't gotten it yet, but I will. So
yeah,
thank you, folks. Everyone, have a good weekend. Later.
Take it easy.